imagine this. You've got a neighbor who looks like the perfect babysitter. Blonde hair, neatly done, sweet face, polite smile. She's the kind of person you trust to watch your dog, water your plants, maybe even look after your kid. But surprise, behind that nice girl vibe, she's actually helping lure children to their deaths and hiding bodies on a lonely moor. That's Myra Hindley. Now meet Ian Brady. Born in Glasgow, raised with a temper, obsessed with violence. When he moves to Manchester, he becomes that weird guy who's too into Nazi books and philosophy. Honestly, if Tinder had been a thing back then, this guy's bio would have just read. Hobbies include being creepy, brooding, and ruining lives. Myra, born in Manchester in 1942, works as a secretary. Friendly enough, always said hello, seemed normal. But when Brady enters her life, normal leaves the building. He's 4 years older, darker, and she falls for him like it's the Beatles in their prime. Except instead of pop songs, what they write together is pure nightmare fuel. So here's the thing, Myra Hindley really did look like the neighbor you'd trust. She had the normal Manchester life, office job, friends, church on Sundays, even helped babysit for people. The type where you'd go, oh, she's sound, not a worry in the world. But then she meets Ian Brady, and boom, everything changes. He's this intense guy into dark philosophy, obsessed with Nazis, and reading crime novels like they're self-help books. Instead of saying, yeah, this dude's unhinged, Myra goes, you know what sounds hot? She doesn't just crush on him, she absorbs him. She bleaches her hair, changes her clothes, starts writing diary entries about how she'd do anything for him. The good neighbor babysitter routine, that's just the mask. Underneath, she's driving the car, luring the kids, being the friendly face of what was basically a horror movie playing out in real life. And here's the mini twist, she wasn't some shy passenger dragged along. Evidence later showed she was active, persuasive. She's the one who walked up to victims smiling like, hey, need a lift? Because let's be real, kids, don't hop into a stranger's van with a guy who looks like Ian Brady. But with Myra, different story. July 12, 1963. It's a Saturday night in Manchester, and 16-year-old Pauline Reed is heading to a dance. Pretty normal teen stuff. But Myra Hindley pulls up in her little van and says, hey, I lost a glove, want to help me look for it? That's the trick. The glove doesn't exist. The lift isn't innocent. Pauline climbs in, Brady tails on his motorbike, and they head straight for Saddleworth Moor. Hours later, Pauline is gone. Her throat is cut and she's buried in a shallow grave, and the people back home, they just think she ran late for the dance. Fast forward to November the same year. John Kilbride, just 12 years old, goes missing from a market. Myra is the one who convinces him to take a ride, promising him a drink. Same formula. Brady does the killing, Myra is the friendly face. By the time the boy is missed, he's already buried on the moor. Here's the twist, neighbors and friends still thought Myra was the sweet, helpful babysitter. Nobody suspected the bleach blonde girl next door was actively driving around with kids who never came back. By now, Myra and Brady aren't just dabbling in horror, they're full-time directors of their own nightmare series. December 1964, Leslie Ann Downey, just 10 years old, is lured away from a fairground. The pair record her last hours on tape. Imagine being the detectives who had to sit and listen to that. That tape alone turned stomachs across Britain when it was played in court. Then in October 1965, they push it even further. Their victim this time, 17-year-old Edward Evans. But here's the twist. Myra's brother-in-law, David Smith, happens to witness Brady kill Evans in their own living room. Yeah, you heard that right, Brady literally murdered a teenager in the house like it was just another night in. Smith panics, bolts, and the next morning he goes straight to the guards. He tells them everything, the murder, the weird vibes, the bodies on the moors. Police search Myra's place, find Edward Evans's body in a locked bedroom, and boom, the babysitter neighbor and her creepy boyfriend are finally cornered. April 1966. Courtroom packed, press everywhere, the entire country waiting to see if the babysitter neighbor and her creepy boyfriend would actually pay for what they did. Brady is charged with 3 murders. Myra is charged with 2, plus being an accessory in another. The prosecution plays the tape of Leslie Ann Downey. People in the courtroom can barely sit through it. And Myra, she stares straight ahead like she's waiting for her bus. Cold. Here's the twist: the death penalty had just been abolished in Britain a few months earlier. If the timing had been different, they both could have been executed. Instead, life sentences. That meant decades of front-page headlines, endless interviews, and families stuck reliving their pain every time Myra tried to appeal. Fast forward 20 years, mid-80s, out of nowhere, Brady and Myra finally admit to the other murders. They lead police back to Saddleworth Moor to dig for bodies. Pauline Reed is finally found after more than 2 decades missing, but Keith Bennett still never recovered. His family never got closure. And Myra's excuse? She swears she wasn't present for some of the killings, just waited outside or in the other room. But photos, evidence, and her own actions make it pretty clear she was in this as deep as Brady. She wasn't the passenger, she was the co-driver. So what happens when the so-called babysitter next door and her creepy boyfriend finally get locked up? You'd think the story ends there, but nope, this one drags on for decades like the worst Netflix series that just won't quit. Myra Hindley, the bleach blonde, innocent neighbor, instantly becomes Britain's most hated woman. And I don't mean unpopular, I mean full on. Don't you dare ever let her out levels of public anger. Every time she appealed for release, headlines exploded. Politicians got dragged into debates. Families of victims had to relive everything just because she wanted a chance at parole. She tried to reinvent herself behind bars, reading books, converting to Catholicism, writing letters about how she was controlled by Brady. And yet nobody bought it. Because, hello, she was literally the one luring kids into cars. You don't just bleach your hair, put on a cardigan and say, "Oops, my bad." Society never forgave her. She stayed in prison until she died in 2002 at the age of 60. Brady, on the other hand, leaned into being the villain. He was sentenced to life with a whole life tariff, which basically means you're never stepping outside again, champ. Instead of rotting quietly, he played mind games. He gave interviews where he acted superior, talked about philosophy, and tried to present himself as this misunderstood intellectual. Spoiler, he was still a murderer. He died in 2017 in Ashworth Psychiatric Hospital at 79 years old, leaving nothing behind but bitterness. Here's the real gut punch: Keith Bennett's family never got closure. Searches on Saddleworth Moor went on for decades. In the 1980s, in the 2000s, even as late as 2012, detectives and volunteers kept digging. Brady claimed he couldn't remember where Keith was buried. Maybe he forgot, maybe he just enjoyed the power of holding that secret. Either way, Keith's mother died without ever finding her son. That's the kind of cruelty that lingers way beyond prison walls. And even after Myra and Brady were gone, the story never stopped haunting the UK. Schools used it as the cautionary tale. Parents told kids, don't ever trust a stranger even if they look nice. Their faces still pop up in documentaries, newspapers, clickbait headlines like ghosts that refuse to fade. The legacy is brutal. Myra Hindley showed that evil doesn't always look like a monster under the bed. Sometimes it looks like a smiling neighbor offering you a ride. And Brady, he showed how far obsession and ego can go when no one checks it. So the final twist is this: the moors are still there, cold, quiet, and empty. But people say when you stand out there in the wind, you can't help but wonder if one more grave is still hidden beneath your feet. And that, my friend, is the kind of neighborly secret that keeps Britain awake at night.